So thank you again for all of you joining us tonight. So the reason we're holding this session is because DC residents deserve more than sound bites and headlines. We need a clear understanding of what's happening on Capitol Hill. And tonight, Representative Raskin is going to talk to us about the procedural steps ahead and how we can make a real impact by assisting him. As you know, the emergency takeover is more than a political maneuver. It is a challenge to our right to govern, our self-right to govern. And it's important that each of us are aware of what we can do in order to assist our allies on the Hill as they try to help us move forward.
Deirdre.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm delighted to be with you.
So great. Could everyone see and hear the Congressman? Give me the thumbs up. Let me know. Okay, Congressman, I just want to let you know that the residents of the District of Columbia are so excited to have you here. We have over 600 people on the line right now, with more coming in. We have a few watching on YouTube. So
hello, Washington, D.C. Hello, everybody.
So I know you have limited time tonight, and we are so thankful for you being here tonight to talk to us. You're no better person to have navigate this moment, and we greatly appreciate you as a friend and ally on the Hill to talk to us tonight, to walk us through the joint resolution. So let's jump right in. The first question I have is, what are the next steps for the Joint Resolution 115, and what is the expected timeline for action in Congress?
So the House Joint Resolution 115 would nullify the emergency that was falsely declared by President Trump. And so we've got the power to do that under the Home Rule Act, under that Section 740. And so there's two problems, basically. One is there's obviously no emergency. The emergency was a public relations crisis around the Epstein file. But two, even in the case of a real emergency, the president is limited to directing the mayor to make the MPD available for a particular federal function. The president doesn't have the power to take over the Metropolitan Police Department. And I think your Attorney General, Brian Schwab, did a very good job in blunting that, although, the president is still unclear exactly about that. But in any event, the emergency contemplated by the Home Rule Act is a federal emergency, but all they've talked about is local stuff like graffiti and the blight of homelessness and beautifying different parts of the city, but there's no federal emergency. A federal emergency would be, for example, a violent insurrection attacking the Capitol of the United States, endangering the vice president and the Congress, and the president calling upon the police department to come and serve a particular federal function. Of course, the president did nothing with regard to the MPD during the actual insurrection on January 6, 2021, and he did not mobilize and deploy the National Guard either. So in the case of a real emergency, he did nothing. This is plainly a fake emergency and just part of this staged, theater that he's conducting around the country with deployments of National Guard from red states into blue states. So the next step procedurally is it would be assigned to the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. I was, remember, the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. I've moved over to be the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. So now it's my friend Robert Garcia from California, who shares all of my views about this. And I think all of the Democrats now are pro-statehood, pro-self-government, pro-freeing DC. And so, like with everything else, we don't have high hopes that the Republicans are going to conduct a hearing on this. Unfortunately, there's no privileged resolution or procedural mechanism that takes this right to the floor. Certain things do have that. For example, like impeachment, there are things that you can just get to the floor even around the majority, but this would require a so-called discharge resolution, we would need to get all the Democrats, which we could probably get, but then enough Republicans to put it on the floor. So we're using it basically to educate and galvanize the Democrats so that when the Republicans come back and try to extend the emergency, which is also built into the Home Rule Act, that our people will all vote against it. And then even if they can get it out of the House, even if we can't pull enough Republicans over, it would be presumably blocked in the Senate, although we need to educate our Senate colleagues too, because remember that they would need 60 votes in order to invoke cloture against a filibuster. Then the question becomes, well, what if the president just declares another emergency? What if he just decides on back-to-back emergencies all the way to the end of his term? And we would argue, and presumably your attorney general would argue, that this violates the spirit and the letter of the Home Rule Act, because the way it was set up by Congress was DC gets to govern itself as a self-governing municipality. If there's a federal emergency and interest compelling the deployment of the police for federal purpose, that can happen for 48 hours before Congress can try to change it. I introduced my bill, I think, right after 48 hours, maybe it was 72 hours. But then in any event, it's over in 30 days unless Congress, the House and the Senate, signed by the president, votes to implement it. And we don't think you can get around that just by continually renewing the 30-day emergency. That defeats the whole purpose of ending the emergency after 30 days. Undoubtedly, in their inimitable way, MAGA would argue that there's nothing stopping them from doing it. There's no textual preclusion of announcing another 30-day period. So that would end up going to court if that's where things go. But that's the way I see this playing out, Deirdre.
Well, that was a lot, and we appreciate the overview. I have my next question for you is, so specifically, what milestones should we be looking for as this moves forward?
Well, I mean, one would be is if we could get some Republicans to come over to our side, the way we have on various things. I mean, generally it's one or two, but right now we have somewhere around a dozen Republicans on our side in terms of releasing the Epstein files. So that has created a certain kind of fluidity and suppleness in the political environment here. So it's not impossible, but we're really going to have to wait for them to get back. I've tried to reach different people during our recess, and it's just not at that level of urgency for our Republican friends, as you can imagine, even the ones who might be the most sympathetic. So one possibility is, do we actually get any Republicans on our side? If not, well, then the next step is, all right, when the 30 days are up, do they bring forward a bill, and are we able to stop it in the House? If we're not able to stop it in the House, can it be stopped in the Senate? In other words, will the Democrats hold so they don't pull over enough of the more conservative Democrats to allow it to keep going? I imagine, and I certainly would campaign for us to be able to have total Democratic opposition to any continuation. Assuming that holds, if they can't invoke cloture and so it doesn't pass the Senate, at that point it's frozen unless they decide Trump is just going to impose another emergency. And then they're just going to keep renewing the emergency on a unilateral basis, which obviously is not so foreign to them, given how much they've circumnavigated the power of Congress generally on everything. They might just try and do that. And at that point, I imagine that your Attorney General, Schwab, and the mayor would probably decide to go to court to say that defeats the meaning of the Home Rule Act. As the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, I would certainly try to lead an amicus brief by the Democrats in Congress saying that this, in fact, is a defeat of the meaning of the Home Rule Act if the president thinks that he can just override the congressional statute and continually impose a state of emergency on the district.
So with that said, just clarify for us what exactly you think is the biggest obstacle we're facing right now with moving that through or something similar.
Well, you can intervene at each step in that process that I just outlined. I mean, if there are Republicans that you guys know that you're dealing with, I know it's few and far between these days. I mean, my best friends, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Mitt Romney, those guys are long gone. It's a very different kind of Republican Party today. But if you know any, that's a place where you can be helpful. But I think it's going to be very important to stiffen the backs of the Democratic senators to make sure that everybody all over the country understands this is a fundamental question for home rule. And I always try to put it in the context that you guys are in the middle of your fight for statehood, and you don't need to be set backwards by a bunch of, people who want to turn the clock back to Jim Crow. Literally now, when it comes to the Voting Rights Act, I mean, they destroyed Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance requirement, and now they're trying to crush Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. I mean, they want nothing of it to be left. And that Louisiana case is coming up in the Supreme Court on September 15th. But in any event, so I think you need to make sure that this is something, you guys are lobbying the Democratic senators and you are working with the Democratic senators to make sure that people are going to stand shoulder to shoulder and strong against any effort to continue this. And assuming we can make that happen, as long as we, can blockade any further state of emergency in the Senate, then it's going to be a fight in court. That is, if they, I mean, what we've got going for us, of course, is that, Donald Trump's attention span is like -3 seconds. And fundamentally, as you know, they don't care about DC, but I guess he does care about the 8-block area, within his field of vision. So maybe he does decide to just impose another emergency, which some of the Republicans have talked about, that they could just continually renew the emergency. And, that does become a legal fight. And I imagine it's something that, your lawyers have thought about.
So it sounds like the main thing we can do, which we're going to have someone speak after you leave, is lobbying on the Hill, trying to get the Democratic senators to steadfast and try to see if we can persuade any Republicans in the House.
Yeah.
And with that said,
Yeah. And I didn't mean to overlook the House side too. I mean, the House Democrats need to hear from you as well. If for no other reason that, if we maintain solidarity on the House side, it's much harder for senators to break away on the Senate side in the Democratic ranks. If we lose, a dozen or 15 people, it would not look good in terms of going over to the Senate. So yeah, I mean, I would mobilize your troops for all of it. And, I mean, the bottom line in, when my district has 55,000 federal workers in it, including NOAA, USAID, NIH, and the very first protest I spoke at USAID, I said that my slogan for this year is going to be "A rally a day keeps the fascists away," and you guys have to keep rallying and protesting to let people know that you're there and that, that's your city. I saw some people at Union Station heckling the vice president, and I thought that was great. I mean, people should have a sense of indignation and insult about what's taking place. And people need to know that people in DC are on fire. There was a very powerful press conference that I saw the mayor of Chicago do with the governor of Illinois and the attorney general and the U.S. senators and the congressional delegation. And, you guys don't have all of that because you're not a state yet, but you can have, the council and the mayor and the school board and the ANC or, around. I mean, but I think those public manifestations of opposition are so important because remember, their rhetoric is, oh, Trump is really interested in crime fighting. The same guy, whose party just pocketed $1 billion from your locally raised revenues, right? And nullified hundreds of millions of dollars in DOJ criminal law enforcement grants to police departments across the country and, victim rights organizations and all this stuff. So like, you can't let them get away with the tough on crime rhetoric. It's just not possible that Donald Trump cares more about public safety and public education and public peace in DC than you guys do. So I think that the we the people dimension of this is essential.
And do you think there will be, how much longer, how much more willing do you think the red states will be in sending in troops, sending in more troops?
Yeah, I mean, that's an internal Republican Party matter. And, I do think that we've got to turn up the heat in terms of pointing out that you've got governors sending National Guard to DC or, threatening to send it to Chicago or Detroit or LA or whatever, who have communities in their own states that have higher crime rates. But the real thing is not to, fall into a red state, blue state civil war paradigm for this. There's a lot that the federal government could do to help communities in all of our states. For example, 90% of Americans want a universal violent criminal background check on all gun purchases and sales. So the Brady Act has been working great to reduce gun violence and gun homicides, but there are all these gaping loopholes in it that the Republicans and the NRA won't allow us to address. Like, you can buy firearms online and you can get them at gun shows and you can have a private, so-called private sale and so on. So we should be saying, in the minute they say, well, what's your program? And say, well, let's start with what everybody wants almost, which is a universal violent criminal background check. Let's ban assault weapons, which 70% of Americans want. There are things we can do immediately to make our community safer. I said on TV today, if the president wants to convene a summit with all the mayors and the governors to talk about what's working, then he should, because the crime is way down in DC and Baltimore and Chicago and so on. Obviously, if you're the victim of crime, that doesn't make any difference to you that the percentages have gone down. But there are things that are working in different parts of the country. That would be an actually constructive thing that the federal government could do. But this is, of course, theatrical and cinematic, and it's meant to be a diversion from the Epstein file, which Donald Trump had repeatedly promised he would release if he were elected, and now is doing everything in his power to sweep under the rug, because he doesn't apparently like some of the mentions of him and the photographs and the video glimpses that we get of him in different places.
So since you mentioned some of the mayors, Congressman, can you share with us whether you and your colleagues have been able to work closely with our delegate or mayor or council on this resolution in particular? And if so, how can residents best support and strengthen those efforts?
So, well, yes, I mean, I've spoken to the mayor several times about stuff going on, and she's obviously been very engaged in it. And Eleanor has joined us on this resolution and then asked me to co-lead another bill that she has put in several times to confer authority over the DC National Guard on the mayor. As you know, the president has authority over the DC National Guard. And, so if you liken DC to a state now, it's the only state where the chief executive doesn't have control of the National Guard, but rather it's with the president. Again, we don't have high hopes of that passing under Republican control, but it, again, makes the point. I mean, if we'd had the mayor in control of the National Guard, they would have been deployed much, much earlier on January 6th, 2021. The mayor would not have been waiting around to see whether there was still a chance of overthrowing the vice president and the Congress and the presidential election result, which was essentially what Trump was doing. He was, waiting to see which way things were going.
Well, we appreciate your time, and I know it's getting close to you having to leave. I guess the last question, so we talked about targeting senators and congressmen. Is there any one or two people you can name that we should really be putting some pressure on? Anyone in particular, you think?
Yeah, I think, again, I think that the Democrats are going to be instinctively in favor of you guys. So I don't think it's going to be that complicated. And I don't know of anybody who's given us a hard time. I mean, maybe, and I'm saying this without looking at the list because I don't want any of my colleagues accusing me of deploying forces against them or anything. But, we did have some votes that some members considered tough on your criminal justice reform. And when I was the lead over on the oversight committee, we were mobilizing the Democrats, and I think the vast majority of Democrats stuck with us. But there may have been 15 or 20 who took a walk. I'm sure you'll figure out probably most of them were freshmen, and a lot of freshmen are very nervous about votes like that. But it just goes to show why DC needs statehood, because fundamentally, no matter like how sympathetic people are with you, they've got to tend to their own districts and states first, and rightfully so. I mean, that's just how it works. And so DC needs its statehood because it needs people who are going to be always fighting for DC and having, votes and other things that they can bring to the table. So it's a tough situation, but I think you've got the solidarity and the support, certainly of Democrats all across America. And, I talk about it a lot. And it used to be like people didn't really know what I was talking about. And now everybody knows what I'm talking about. And more people are talking about it because it's not just what America can do for DC, it's what DC can do for America. And I feel that very strongly, having, spent some years on Capitol Hill now.
Well, I thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your friendship. We appreciate your support in this endeavor. And I hope that in the future, you'll come back and talk to us again, maybe in person next time.
Absolutely. And I don't know I think that was your predecessor, Debbie Shore?
She was about 2 or 3 predecessors before.
I spoke with her. I don't know if she's out there, but hello to Debbie. I've spoken a couple other times to your group. Thanks for inviting me, everybody. Hang tough. And if you're on Capitol Hill, come see me. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So now we're going to turn our attention to Free DC so they can, we have Michelle from Free DC's congressional group who will speak to us about actions we can take right now. Michelle, I think I unmuted you. Are you good?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, yes, I'm Michelle Chappell. I'm the co-chair of the Congress Working Group for Free DC. I'm also a newly elected member of the Executive Committee for Ward 1 Democrats. So I'm a fellow party Democrat out there. Yeah. And I want to say, first of all, thank you so much to Representative Raskin for enlightening us about the termination resolution and what the kind of state of play is in Congress. And thank you so much, Deirdre Brown, for inviting Free DC to this conversation so that people can learn about how to take action. I think a lot of Democrats in DC are used to taking action on behalf of others, on behalf of states that might have close elections. And it's our turn to advocate for ourselves. Let me tell you first, if you're not familiar with Free DC, what we are is we're a renewed statehood movement. That's at our core. We are also a mass movement. We are trying to get as many members as possible in order to defend DC autonomy and fight against the fascist regime that is the second Trump administration. I'm going to try to start sharing a few links with Deirdre and see if she can pass them along to you. We'll see if that works out. I want to invite everybody to check out the Free DC orientation page. We have a number of orientations coming up, both online and in person. Please find, if you haven't already been oriented, please find a time where you can join. It's a really informative session about kind of the threat that we are facing, particularly in the capital city, but also just in general, the threat that our democracy is facing from this administration. I'd love to get a thumbs up from anybody who's already gone through a Free DC orientation. Is there anybody here? Yay, Stacy, awesome. Oh, there's a bunch of you. Welcome, welcome. So happy to see y'all. So spread the word among your Ward 3 neighbors that we need to keep growing our numbers. And there's actually, in Ward 3, there is a kickoff party happening at the end of September. Let me copy that link. And y'all can on September, I believe it's September 27th, there's an open house. Y'all can come and commune with your neighbors and continue your work. So to talk specifically about the termination resolution, I hope you heard a lot about what Representative Raskin was saying about calling members of Congress and making sure that all the Democrats are in formation, and also trying to pull away some Republicans. What I'm sharing now is a call script that has a script both for DC residents and also for allies outside of DC to call members of Congress. And it's linked to a spreadsheet where we have prioritized members of Congress that are either Democrats that have kind of voted against DC autonomy in the past. We also have the senators prioritized on there who voted for the CR in March that started the whole budget debacle. So those are really key members that we would like to receive a lot of phone calls about this issue. So if you are able to make phone calls to Congress, this is a great way to advocate for the end of the termination, or the end of the emergency, to advocate for the termination resolution. The more Congress people hear from us, the more likely they are to take the emergency situation seriously and not let it slide. Because that's the big concern, right? Is that it will continue after the 30 days are up. And we want to make sure that they know we are not going to stand for that. And I would love to see a thumbs up from anybody who in the last campaign cycle, did you ever make phone calls or canvass in another state? Did you make donations to a campaign in another state? Did you write postcards to voters in another state? See how much work we have done for others. Look at this group. Y'all are amazing. And now is the time to call in those favors. Now's the time to reach out to any campaign contacts you have in other states, any family, close friends you have in other states, and say, DC needs you. Please call your member of Congress because you're a constituent. We calling as DC residents, you will sometimes get pushback about not being a constituent. We don't listen to that because they're voting on our laws and our rights. So that makes us everybody's constituent. But when it does make a difference, especially in red states, especially with Republicans, if they're hearing from people in their own district, in their own state. So the more outreach you can do to your connections in other states, the more successful this campaign can be. We also have a separate allies project that is letter writing to members of Congress. So I'm going to drop that link right now. So this is for people who might not be phone callers, but like my dad was not a phone caller, but I could get him to send an email to his representative. So that's for your kind of lower lift people that maybe won't go to the effort of calling, but sure, they'll send an email. But the number one thing that we can do as DC residents, we don't have representation, we don't have senators, but we live right here. We can show up in person. We can be a pain in the butt to every congressperson who has not so far agreed with us. So as soon as Congress comes back into session in September, we are having not one, but 2 lobby days on the Hill. I'm going to drop the link for those. The first is on September 4th. And then the second is the following Monday on September 8th. So if you can make one or both of those, it would be fantastic. Anybody who has already lobbied on ever for any reason on Capitol Hill, give me a thumbs up. I want to see how many lobbyists we have, professional, volunteer, whatever. All right, we got some out there. Good. That's amazing. A lot of y'all have done it. So
Michelle, when you get a moment, we have
yeah.
one or two questions for you, looks like.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. I'm almost through my little spiel.
Okay.
So whether or not you have been on the Hill before, Free DC can prep you. We can get you started. We can send you with expert volunteers so that the lobbying is comfortable for you. But we want to make it a little uncomfortable for Congress. And the last link I'm going to share, sorry, it's a lot. it's a lot, but there's a lot going on, is the general Free DC Project occupation page. If the lobbying on Congress is not your cup of tea, or if you have friends that won't do that, but are otherwise interested in getting involved in DC autonomy, they can check out the occupation page. There's something for everyone. And now I'm ready for any questions.
We're going to take one or two questions, and then the chair of the Democratic State Committee is going to jump on. He's at the DNC convention this week, and they are announcing a organizing toolkit that he's going to tell us about. We're going to be the first to hear about it because it doesn't get released till tomorrow.
Oh,
but I see Donna, you have your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you. Keep your questions brief, please. Hold on, I lost you. There we go. Okay, there you go, Donna.
it looks like she's still muted.
Donna, did you see it pop up for you to unmute yourself? Maybe she forgot she had raised her hand. Okay, so she's the only one left with a hand raised. So
Okay.
All righty. Is there anything else we should know? You sent the links. I put the links in the chat for those who are looking. I have one more raised hand, and then we're going to move over to Charles Wilson. Glenn.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Just briefly, the 30-day limit, does that start after Congress comes back in session on September 4th, or does it start the day of the announcement on August 11th? Because in reading the law, it looks like it might start when Congress comes back in session.
I have had this question before, and the answer is that it started on August 11th when it was announced and when the executive order was signed. Even though Congress is not in session, they can still receive documents. So part of starting the emergency is delivering notice to Congress, and that was done. They do a lot of work kind of off the floor when they're out of session. So the clock is running, and so the 30 days will be up September 10th. Thank you for that question. It's a good one.
It looks like Christine.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so much for this. Regarding the letter writing advocacy campaign, just a suggestion. I think it'd be helpful if there were a draft letter that were already there that people could automatically use and send, as opposed to having everybody write in stuff. It would just make it go a lot easier. So if there's a way to do that, because if we're reaching out to people outside of DC, then we'll have to tell them what the legislation is. If there's just, a paragraph or two saying we're writing you to express support for, HR, blah, 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 like, which does this, that would be really helpful.
I believe it does. I have not, to full disclosure, I have not used the form, but I believe once you enter the information, then some language pops up. But if that's not true, I thank you for that suggestion. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Charlie, and then Ann, and then we're going to move on to Charles Wilson. Charlie, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick clarifying question. My understanding is that the timeline for the takeover of MPD is under the 30 days, but the National Guard deployment is under a different timeline. Is that correct? And could you clarify that for us?
Yeah, the National Guard has been deployed for 45 days. And to be honest with you, I don't really understand how that's possible, given that the emergency is for 30 days. So I think that is a question for maybe some attorneys, someone in the AG's office. I'm not sure of the answer to that, because based on my understanding of reading the Home Rule Act, everything should end after 30 days.
Perfect. That looks like that's all the questions we have, Michelle. We appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate you cooperating with us, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, you guys.
Thank you. Charles Wilson, who is chair of the DC Democratic State Committee, is going to jump on to talk about a new organizing toolkit from DNC. Charles, you should be unmuted and should be able to speak.
Hey, Deirdre, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Hey, good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody. Want to first shout out to Deirdre Brown and the entire Ward 3 Executive Committee for pulling this meeting together so quickly. Obviously, the numbers show that there was a whole lot of interest. Deirdre mentioned I'm here at the DNC. We actually shared this meeting with our DNC colleagues so that they shared it with folks in their state. So I think that bumped up the numbers. But I'm excited that we are actually, hopefully tomorrow, we'll announce a new organizing tool through NGP Van that kind of ties into what Michelle was talking about and answers Christine's question, where essentially I think we all understand is that we need help outside of DC. And this tool, you'll be able to send a link to your friends and family in other states. They'll put in their name, their address, and the very next screen that pops up will be a screen that highlights their local representatives in Congress and the Senate, along with a form letter that they can just press send, and it'll send it directly to them to show support for DC. So we look forward to hopefully announcing that tomorrow. We're working out some kinks today, but the DNC is very much in support of this. They're going to share, we're going to share with all the state parties across the country, and build some real momentum around this. So again, Deirdre, great meeting, and shout out to the Ward 3 Democrats. Encourage everybody to join the Ward 3 Democrats. If you're not in Ward 3 and you're in another ward, join your ward organization. There's energy and there's room and there's space for you guys to get involved. So thanks so much, Deirdre. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much. So it is exactly 7 o'clock. I want to thank Representative Raskin, Free DC, and Charles Wilson for getting on, spreading the word. We will send out the link to the video after the meeting so you can share it with your friends and family. And thank you all for spending an hour with us tonight. Have a great evening.